I never thought I'd be sitting in a lawyer's office at 23 years old, learning that my billionaire grandfather had left me everything. Not a trust fund. Not a percentage. Everything. $3.8 billion, 5 estates, a private jet, and a business empire that stretched across 3 continents. But here's what the lawyer didn't tell me right away. My grandfather didn't leave me this fortune because he loved me most. He left it to me because he knew exactly what my family would do when they found out. And he wanted me to watch them destroy themselves trying to take it from me. This is the story of how I learned that the cruelest revenge isn't what you do to people. It's giving them exactly what they think they want, and watching them choke on it. Before we dive into this incredible story of betrayal, greed, and the most calculated revenge you've ever heard, make sure you hit that subscribe button and smash the like icon. This is Revenge Unleashed, where we bring you the most jaw-dropping true stories of people who refuse to be victims. Drop a comment below telling us what you would do with $3.8 billion. Now, let's get into it. My name is Marcus Chen, and for most of my life, I was the forgotten grandson. My grandfather, William Chen, built his fortune from absolutely nothing. He came to America from Taiwan with $200 in his pocket and an engineering degree that nobody here recognized. He worked 3 jobs, lived in a basement apartment with 5 other immigrants, and saved every penny until he could start his own manufacturing company. 50 years later, Chen Industries was worth billions, producing components for everything from smartphones to satellites. But success changed my grandfather. Or maybe it just revealed who he'd always been. He became obsessed with legacy, with worthiness, with making sure his empire went to someone who deserved it. I grew up in Portland, about as far from the Connecticut estate where my grandfather held court as you could get while staying in the continental United States. My dad was the youngest of 3 children, and the only one who'd walked away from the family business. He'd wanted to be a teacher, and my grandfather never forgave him for it. We saw Grandpa William maybe once every 2 years, awkward visits where he'd quiz me and my sister on our grades, our ambitions, our plans. I always felt like I was failing some test I didn't know I was taking. Meanwhile, my cousins, the children of my 2 uncles who'd stayed in the family business, they were groomed from birth to take over. Brandon and Victoria, golden children who summered in the Hamptons and went to boarding schools that cost more than my dad made in 5 years. They visited Grandpa William every month. They interned at Chen Industries. They were featured in business magazines as the next generation of the Chen dynasty. Everyone knew they'd inherit everything. It was just understood. Then, 3 months ago, my grandfather died. Heart attack at his desk, reviewing quarterly reports. He was 89 years old and still working 12-hour days. The funeral was enormous, hundreds of business leaders and politicians paying their respects. I flew out with my parents, wearing a suit I'd bought at Target specifically for job interviews. I remember standing at the back of the reception, watching Brandon and Victoria work the room like they already owned it. Victoria actually told someone she was looking forward to taking the company in a bold new direction. Brandon was calculating which divisions to sell off for quick cash. The will reading was scheduled for 1 week after the funeral. Everyone assumed it was a formality. My 2 uncles were already arguing about who would be CEO. Their lawyers were already drafting paperwork. And then we all sat down in that mahogany-paneled conference room, and everything exploded. The lawyer, a man named Mr. Hoffman who'd worked with my grandfather for 40 years, opened the will and started reading. Minor bequests first. $1 million to various charities. Another $1 million split between long-time employees. Comfortable pensions for the household staff. Then he got to the big part, and I watched my uncles lean forward in their seats. And Mr. Hoffman said, the entirety of my estate, including all assets, properties, and controlling interest in Chen Industries, I leave to my grandson Marcus Chen. For a solid 10 seconds, nobody moved. I thought I'd heard wrong. Then my Uncle Richard stood up so fast his chair fell over. That's impossible, he said. Marcus. He's nobody. He doesn't even work for the company. This has to be a mistake. But it wasn't a mistake. Mr. Hoffman handed me a sealed envelope, and inside was a letter in my grandfather's handwriting. I read it right there, with everyone watching me. It said, Marcus, you're probably confused. You barely knew me. But I've been watching you. Your father sent me your report cards, your acceptance letters, your scholarship notifications. He was proud of you, even when you didn't think anyone cared. You worked 3 jobs to put yourself through state college. You graduated with honors in computer science without owing a penny to anyone. You did what I did. You built something from nothing. Your cousins have never worked for anything in their lives. Your uncles have been stealing from my company for years, thinking I was too old to notice. I'm leaving you everything because you're the only one who doesn't expect it. And because I want to see if you're strong enough to keep it. Don't let them take it from you. If you do, you'll prove me wrong about you. The room erupted. My aunt started crying. My uncles started shouting about undue influence and mental incompetence. Brandon literally pointed at me and said, "You conniving little nobody. You manipulated a senile old man." Victoria was already on her phone with a lawyer. My mother grabbed my arm, her eyes wide with fear. She knew what was coming. So did I. They sued me before the ink was dry on the death certificate. Both uncles, both aunts, all 4 cousins. 7 different lawsuits challenging the will, claiming everything from forgery to elder abuse to fraud. They froze the assets. They got injunctions. They gave interviews to business magazines painting me as a gold digger who'd swooped in and stolen a dying man's fortune. They called me a thief on social media. They hired investigators to dig up dirt on me. They found out about a college girlfriend I'd lived with and tried to use it as evidence of moral turpitude. They went after my parents, auditing their taxes, investigating my father's school for code violations. For 2 months, I couldn't access a penny of the inheritance. I was still living in my studio apartment, still working my job as a junior developer at a software company, but now I was also paying lawyers with money I didn't have. My parents offered to remortgage their house to help. I told them absolutely not. This was my fight now. But here's what my family didn't know. My grandfather had left me something else along with that letter. A second envelope, marked, "Open only if they contest the will." Inside were documents. 50 years of documents. Spreadsheets, emails, bank transfers, photographs. My grandfather had been investigating his own sons for 3 years. And he'd found everything. Uncle Richard had been embezzling. Small amounts at first, then larger. Over 15 years, he'd stolen nearly $80 million through shell companies and fake vendor contracts. Uncle James was worse. He'd been selling Chin Industries secrets to competitors. Patents, designs, client lists. He'd made over $100 million betraying the company his father built. My grandfather had evidence of every transaction. He'd built an ironclad case, but he'd never filed it. He'd been waiting. Waiting to see if they'd show their true colors one more time. And they had. I took the documents to Mr. Hoffman. "What do I do with these?" I asked. He smiled for the first time since I'd met him. "You give them options," he said. "Criminal prosecution and prison, or they drop every lawsuit, sign away any claim to the estate, and disappear." I called a family meeting. Everyone came, confident they were about to force me into a settlement. We met at the Connecticut estate, in my grandfather's study. The same room where he'd made his first $1 million deal. I sat behind his desk. They sat across from me like I was on trial. Uncle Richard started talking about how we were family, how we could work this out, how surely I didn't want to tear the family apart over money. I opened my laptop and turned it around. On the screen was the first page of evidence against Uncle Richard. A transfer of $500,000 from a Chin Industries account to a shell company he controlled. His face went white. "Where did you get that?" he whispered. I clicked to the next page. Another transfer. Then another. 50 pages of transfers. "Grandpa knew," I said simply. "He knew everything." Then I turned to Uncle James. I didn't say anything. I just played a recording. My grandfather had bugged the executive offices. On the recording, Uncle James was on the phone with a competitor, offering to sell them the specs for a new manufacturing process. In exchange for $12 million. Uncle James looked like he might throw up. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, and I was surprised by how calm my voice was. "You're going to drop every lawsuit. You're going to sign documents relinquishing any claim to Grandpa's estate. You're going to resign from Chin Industries. And you're going to do it today. Right now. Or I send these documents to the FBI, and you spend the next 20 years in federal prison." "You can't do this," Uncle Richard said, but there was no strength in his voice. We're family. So am I said. And you called me a thief on national television. You tried to destroy my parents. You hired people to follow me, to intimidate me. You did all of that for money that was never yours. So yes, I can do this. And I will. They signed. All of them. My uncles, my aunts, my cousins. Victoria was crying. Brandon looked at me with pure hatred. You'll fail, he said. You don't know anything about running a company. You'll destroy everything he built. I didn't respond. I just watched them leave. Watched them walk out of the house they'd thought would be theirs. That was 2 months ago. Since then, I've been learning to run a billion-dollar company. It's terrifying. I'm 23 years old making decisions that affect thousands of employees and millions of customers. I've hired advisors, kept the best executives, fired the ones who were loyal to my uncles. I've learned more in 60 days than I did in 4 years of college. And here's what I've discovered. My grandfather was right. Not about me being ready, I'm not sure anyone's ever ready for this. But he was right that I wouldn't take it for granted. Every morning I walk into that office, I remember sleeping on a friend's couch during college because I couldn't afford rent and tuition. I remember my dad coming home exhausted from teaching and still helping me with my homework. I remember being nobody. And I make decisions based on that. I've raised wages for factory workers. I've expanded benefits. I've invested in new technology that my uncles thought was too risky. In 2 months, we've increased productivity by 12% and employee satisfaction by even more. My cousins have had to get real jobs. Brandon is working at a consulting firm, making less in a year than he used to spend on cars. Victoria is living in an apartment in Queens, taking the subway to work. My uncles are still wealthy from their years of stealing, but they're nobody now in the business world. Everyone knows what they did. No board will seat them. No company will hire them. I saw Uncle Richard last week. He was leaving a restaurant as I was going in. He looked old, defeated. He started to say something to me, then stopped. What could he say? He'd stolen from his own father and gotten caught. I nodded at him and walked past. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt tired. People ask me if I feel guilty about what happened to my family. The truth is, I don't. My grandfather gave them every chance. They could have been honest. They could have built something themselves. Instead, they stole and schemed and tried to take from someone else. When that didn't work, they attacked me, tried to destroy my life to protect their own lies. I didn't destroy them. They destroyed themselves. I just held up a mirror. This story isn't really about revenge. It's about what happens when people confuse cruelty with strength, when they mistake taking from others for building something real. My grandfather knew his sons were weak. He knew his grandchildren were spoiled. So he gave his fortune to the one person who understood what it meant to earn something. And in doing so, he gave me the greatest gift anyone ever could. Not money, though that's nice. But the knowledge that I'm strong enough to stand up to people who want to take what's mine. If you're facing betrayal, if people are trying to tear you down because of jealousy or greed, remember this. The best revenge isn't hurting them back. It's proving them wrong. It's becoming exactly what they said you couldn't be. It's succeeding so completely that their hatred becomes irrelevant. My family thought I'd crumble. They thought I was too young, too inexperienced, too soft. Instead, I'm building something they never could. A company where people matter more than profit, where innovation matters more than tradition, where hard work is rewarded instead of connections. $3.8 billion won't define me. How I use it will. And every day, I wake up grateful to my grandfather for trusting me with his legacy. Not because he loved me, we barely knew each other. But because he believed I'd earned it. And that, in the end, is worth more than all the money in the world.